everyone, and welcome to this week's Insight. It's great to have you back, and today it's a real pleasure to talk to somebody else as part of our series, and someone who might be familiar to you from maybe a Reach weekend. Maybe you've seen her on stage or you've seen her on your TV screens, but it's a great pleasure this week to welcome Melissa Johns. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Alistair. How you doing?
Great, and it's lovely to see you here today. And let's start off by saying, how would you describe yourself?
Yes, so it's really important to me to audio describe with everything being online now, especially. It's really important. So I am a white woman in my early 30s. I'm 30, so very early 30s. I have mid-length blonde hair. I am sat in my kitchen with a white background, and I have a pink and white jumper on.
And you have a fascinating background. It's always lovely to speak to people, to reach children who've developed amazing careers, and you've certainly done incredibly well. We'll talk a little bit more about your career as an actor in due course, but I'd like to, if I may, to start really at the very beginning about your upbringing, because I know you're up there in Salford now, but you were, I believe, born in Herefordshire, very different to where you are today. Give us an idea about your upbringing, when your parents first found out that you had a limb difference and so on.
So I was born in Hereford, and I grew up in a little town called Ledbury, which is in Herefordshire, to my mum, Sarah, who was 25 at the time, and my dad, Mike, who was 34. I was their firstborn, so they had no other children. And I suppose just like any new parents to be, were just expecting what they were told should be a perfectly healthy baby. And that nothing showed up on scans or anything. This was 1990, so it's not as if they could prepare for anything. It wasn't until I was born that they found out that I was born without my right forearm and hand. Quite interestingly, which I personally think it's interesting. I think it says a lot about the time, and it says a lot about what others thought about disability. The doctor and the nurses actually wrapped me up really tightly and handed me to my mum and said, she's absolutely perfect. And they didn't tell my mum and dad that I only had one arm, which always makes me laugh, because I think, what did they think, that mum and dad were going to get home and think it had dropped off on the way? It was my dad that knew something was wrong. He thought he'd noticed something as they were weighing me and stuff. And he just said, look, I think I saw something. Are you sure everything's okay? And they said, oh, actually, look, there is actually one small problem, which for my parents, they thought it was one very big problem. Of course they did. This isn't what they expected. And so for them, it was a really hard time. My mum really struggled. She didn't have a support network in terms of, she didn't have Reach. She didn't know about Reach. So she didn't have other parents she could talk to. She often describes it as, she says she thought it was the end of the world, because she just assumed that I wouldn't be able to do so many things. And she often talks about looking through the Argos catalogue and getting me to choose toys that I liked, for Christmas. And she said one day she just sat and cried, because as she flicked through the catalogue, there was no child that looked like her daughter. And I think that really hit home for her, that I was going to live a very different life. And, she wiped away her tears, and she really got on with it. She was fantastic. She threw me in the deep end. I learned to ride a bike. I learned to skip. She came up with every way possible, but very much came up with it on her own.
And that's a big difference today, isn't it? When you look at the level of support, the fact that hopefully somebody, as soon as you were born, would have given your parents a Reach leaflet to say, there's this organisation who can help you, and so on. So for your parents looking back, they must be thinking to themselves, boy, what a difference that would have made.
my parents would have had a completely different, first few years of my life had they have known about Reach. If they'd have known that there were parents out there that they could have called up and just said, oh gosh, I'm really worried. She says that all her friends are skipping and how's she going to skip? And somebody could have said, it's fine. You just get a little band, you tie it round, as I say, they worked everything out, but there's working out the practical logistics and there's having to work out your emotions. And I think what something like Reach does is it not only can give you practical advice, in saying, look, this is how you can do this is how you can do that, but it can also help you voice how you're feeling. And I'm from a very small town. Everybody knew that Sarah's daughter was born with one arm. People would come up to mum in the pram and say, oh, let's have a look at her then. And they pull the blanket back so they could have a good look. And, as I say, there's moving forward with things practically. And then there's mum having to sit on her own every night as a 25-year-old woman thinking, what did she do wrong? And if she'd have had the support network, if she'd have known about Reach, she could have voiced all of that. And I just think maybe those early years would have been so different for her.
And certainly, as you said, those little practical tips about how to work with a skipping rope and so on and so forth. What was their general view in terms of, there seems to be this debate about how much you let children just work it out for themselves, because invariably they often do, and how much did they intervene? There's always that big discussion around that. What was their take on it?
We actually watched some footage recently. My granddad, who's sadly no longer with us, he bought a video camera in 1990, which was the year I was born, which meant that my whole life was kind of documented. No idea why I wanted to be an actor and on camera. But he documented everything. And we were watching a video recently where I wanted to climb up the slide. And I wasn't quite sure how to, hold on with my right arm as I was going up. And my mum is there, trying to catch me. Let me help her up the steps. Let me do this. Let me do that. And it's my nan going, let her do it. She will work it out. Let her do it. But again, for mum, I was this firstborn. Of course, she wanted to protect me. It was easier maybe for other people that didn't have that sort of maternal connection to be able to say, she'll be fine. She'll work it out. And so, yeah, I think mum probably struggled the most. Mum really did want to do everything for me. And other people were sort of encouraging her to maybe just let me try stuff.
Every Reach child that I speak to has their own kind of mechanism, if you like, of dealing with, as they grow up, the looks, the questions, and so on and so forth. How did you deal with all of that? What was your mechanism?
So for me, I had a really hard time growing up. Actually, when I had such a wonderful childhood, I had such a lovely family, wonderful friends, but I hated the way I looked so much. I absolutely loathed the body that I had. I was gutted that it was me that had this body. Why was it me? I used to look at my arm and think, I just don't know. Out of all the people in the world, why was I chosen? Why was it me? And I would rather boil in the heat and wear long sleeve jumpers. If it was too hot, I would carry the jumper over my right arm. I would plan which side of people I would stand, how I would sit, how I would look in photos. And I really did, if the minute I caught sight of someone looking, which obviously as lots of Reach children and adults will know, you're so in tune with people, when they've clocked it, because you're so aware of everything around you that when that click, when that look has happened, when they're going to whisper to their friend and say, have you seen that girl over there? When the child is going to say to their mum, what's wrong with that girl? And I would just get this horrible sick feeling, and my chest would just beat so hard, and I used to get hot, all because they were drawing attention to something that I hated so much. Now, you can't stop people from doing that. Like, the world will always stare. There's not a cure for that, because people are intrigued. We will never stop that. But what we can do is really empower our next generation of children to grow up accepting, loving, celebrating every part about them, so that when they get that look, they don't have that fear that comes over them. They just go, oh, wow, they're looking at me. This is my body. Here we go. And I just didn't have that. And for me, it actually lasted until I was 26. I was 26 when I finally took, I went to my partner's rugby dinner and dance. I set myself a challenge to, his rugby dinner and dance was at the end of May. And at the beginning of May, I set myself a challenge to start to go to the gym and wear, strappy tops, to take part in dance lessons. I used to dance a lot, and then I stopped because I hated the idea of people looking at me and seeing the way my body moved. And I set myself a challenge that at the end of May, that I was going to go to his rugby dinner and dance, and I wasn't going to take a cardigan with me, and I was going to dance, and they were my sort of goals. And I did it, and that was the first hurdle. And it's not as if you're then cured overnight. Overnight everything was fine. It's now I can always go out without a jumper on. It took a lot of time, but it was a really, really difficult journey, and it's one that still catches me every so often. And I've weirdly kind of COVID and not having the chance to go out and, go to parties or go for dinner, kind of being a bit more hidden away. Some of those feelings have started to come back. I took the dog out for a walk the other day, and I just caught myself hiding my arm ever so slightly. And I haven't done that for years. And I just caught myself doing it. And I thought, okay, this is another conversation we need to have then, because I think lockdown would have done this for a lot of people.
I think that's a really good point, actually, and we're digressing a little bit here, but I think, the fact that we haven't had that same level of interaction with each other, we will have forgotten what happens during those interactions. And, for rich families, it is all of a sudden people are going to be looking again, people are going to be talking again, and it'll almost reignite many of those fears and those sort of inner thoughts that people have. It's going to be quite interesting. What advice would you give to youngsters particularly about coming out of lockdown? For example, they've just gone back to school, those of school age and so on. But obviously there's going to be more social situations coming up as the summer progresses, fingers crossed. How do you suggest that they effectively reignite their confidence, if you like?
I think for me, it's about not believing the things you tell yourself when you're sad and on your own. When you're on your own in your own head, or even sometimes when you're with a group of friends, you can almost feel incredibly lonely knowing that your friends aren't feeling what you're feeling. Or maybe they are, and we don't talk about it. Maybe they have a part of their body that they're really self-conscious about, but we all go into our own heads and we magnify things. We magnify how we're feeling, and we don't say it out loud. And I just know that had I have had the confidence to have had those conversations with my friends and my family growing up, I think it would have been a completely different time for me. I think that my advice is for young people to be able to have those conversations, but for everybody around them to allow that environment to happen. It can be really hard when the onus is on us all the time to be the ones saying it. And so, if you have a relative with a limb difference, or you have a friend with a limb difference, obviously don't push anything onto them, of course, but just open up those conversations if it feels right, because when you have a limb difference, or you have a disability, or your body is just different to those around you, you spend so much time worrying about what everybody else thinks. You want to make sure everyone else is okay with it. You don't want your mum to get really frustrated when she sees someone's. Well, I know that if my mum saw someone staring, she saw red. She would get so angry. In that moment, that wasn't the most important thing. It wasn't about her getting angry. It should have been about how I felt. And I know my friends were the same. My friends would get so frustrated with people, and they'd go up to them and they'd say, "Oh, have you got a problem?" And I look back on it now and I think, all I ever wanted was for you to maybe just ignore that and empower me to be able to do it. And the way that you could have empowered me is to have gone, look, I know that those people were staring. Like, how did that make you feel? How do you feel about your own body? Let's talk about how you feel about it.
And I've also heard a phrase sometimes where people say, they are inquire and say, "Are you okay?" And then follow it up by, "Are you really okay?" that effectively is, because you have your own defense mechanisms, and you think, okay, if I just say yes, I'm fine, then it'll go away, I'll be fine. But actually, if somebody then really asks and really checks, almost to be a way to start that conversation.
Absolutely. And if you're able to relate it to something, so if you saw somebody stare and you saw your friend or your relative clock it, and you know that they have a limb difference, they definitely saw that person staring, they saw that person smirking, they saw that person whispering. Be quite specific. Don't just say, are you okay? Maybe say, oh, I saw that. Are you how did that make you feel? Are you all right with that? Because I know that maybe at times that might hurt me, or at times that might make me feel angry. And if you don't feel any of those things, then brilliant, fantastic. I empower you to, keep going with what you're doing. Maybe you can teach the rest of us how we don't do, how we can brush things off. But I just want you to know that there's a space here for you to be able to talk about it, because, as I say, as people with limb differences, we really do care so much about making sure, so many of us, not everyone of course, but so many of us have spent so much energy making sure everyone around us is okay with the way we look, that we just have to be able to open up those conversations so that people ask us, how do we feel about our bodies? Not anybody else. How do we feel?
One of the conversations that comes up a lot at Reach weekends and so on is the whole concept of, what's my child going to do when they grow up, when they get older? Are they going to be able to have normal jobs? Are they able to do the things that people with both arms would be able to do? And your career route of acting is, again, it's one of those careers that we haven't seen representation of people with limb differences particularly. So talk about your acting journey from the very beginning. When first of all did you get into acting? When did you think, actually this would suit me? You said it was, when you, as soon as you saw a camera pointed at you as a child with your grandfather. But when did you decide that actually this was something you were going to pursue properly?
So I joined the local amateur dramatic society, and I would really encourage any Reach children that are imaginative and love performing, or maybe they don't even know they love performing yet. Get them into a local AmDram. It can work wonders. I was 8 when I joined mine, and I looked back on some photos the other day actually, and I still was the kid that even when I was on stage, I would stand like this or sit like this, right up until I was 16. I did them for 8 years. But however much I still tried hiding a part of my body in front of 200 people, which I really thought I was getting away with, they'll never know. I still loved the feeling. It was just such an incredible feeling. And I went on to do it I took drama for GCSE, and then I did it at A level. And then I took a year out. I had a boyfriend at the time who we decided we were going to go traveling. So we traveled Australia for 6 months. Again, mum and dad terrified. She's going to the other side of the world. We're nervous anyway, but she's got one arm, What if people are mean to her? What if people are this? What if people are that? But by that point, I developed quite early on a fairly strong will. And my nan said to me the other day, actually, she said, oh, we really didn't want your brother moving to London, because my brother also went to drama school. He's 9 years younger. She said, we really didn't want him to go to London. And I said, well, you let me go. I said, what, did you not mind about me going? And she said, we couldn't stop you, my darling. And I think that sort of described pretty much how my family have been with me ever since. They couldn't stop me. And I really was very determined to do what it was I wanted to do. Maybe sometimes I wish they had have stopped me in some situations. But we travelled Australia, came back, was fortunate enough to get into drama school. In my auditions, was told by lots of drama schools that I wouldn't be able to get in. Drama schools wouldn't take me. This industry wasn't for me. People like me didn't work in this industry, and the industry wasn't ready for it. Thankfully, the wonderful East 15 acting school just actually went the other way, and they said, There are lots of girls with blonde hair and blue eyes that will graduate from drama school, and they'll all be talented. And actually, you've got something so different about you, not because of the fact that you just physically look different, of course, but the fact that because you have a disability, because you have a limb difference, you have lived your life in such a different way. And what that will allow you to do is take on characters in a different way than anybody else has ever done it. And that is your thing that makes you different, your lived experience. And that's what will, you need to let shine with it, basically. So I was very lucky that I got to go to such a supportive and celebratory drama school when it came to difference. And then, pretty much the same as anybody's journey after drama school. It was pretty awful. And I just thought, why did I do this? This is really hard. I should have been a midwife or a ice cream lady, I think was my other one I wanted to be, or an archaeologist. But I think it's because I just like saying the word archaeology. I didn't really ever know what it meant. I just said I wanted to be one. It sounded clever. First few years were just really tough, as they always are, as they are with anybody. Obviously, I just had the extra barrier of having to really convince directors and casting directors and producers that I know they didn't see this part being played by somebody with one arm. I know that's not what they saw, but could they just give me a chance so that I could prove to them that it will never hinder your production. It will only make it richer by having different people in it, because that's what makes our world so wonderful, is when, we're celebrated for our difference. And so, there was that extra push constantly. Just like any other actor, I had to write, 50 emails a day to casting directors, producers. But with mine, there always had to be that extra thing of going, I know that I look different and I celebrate it, and I encourage you to celebrate it too. And that's when I was fortunate enough to start getting work, really. But it certainly didn't come handed to me on a plate. My agent, who I've been with for 9 years now, she's an incredible woman. She says that, she says one day I'm going to make a documentary about what we went through with you, because she would put me up for roles and they would say, yes, we'd like to audition Melissa. And then she would go back and say, just so you know, and she would tell them about my arm, and they would make up an excuse for me not to be able to come to the audition. And just how we're slowly turning that around. I run DANC, which is the Disabled Artist Networking Community. So and Triple C, I co-run that with some other artists. And we created that a few years ago. And it's because of organizations like that we're able to really encourage these conversations now, so that the arts industry just start to be more inclusive. It can't just be for the one body type that we see. So often it has to start to change, and it is starting to change. It just needs to happen a bit quicker now and a bit more organically.
The one thing we know about the acting profession, and in fact any profession where you get to excel at what you do, it does take a huge amount of determination, grit, stamina, all of those qualities to succeed at anything. But of course, when you have a difference, there's almost an extra layer of determination that you have to have. What kept you going through all of that? Why were you able to just keep on going where so many other people, whether they've got a limb difference or not, fall by the wayside? We know, particularly within the acting profession, the amount of people who graduate from drama school who actually wind up staying in the industry is very low.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, it wasn't just that I wanted to be an actor. I just couldn't imagine my life not being one. There was no other choice. And I had been told no more times than I even care to remember. And I remember reading a quote when I was about 16 or 17 that said, tell me I can't, I'll show you I can. And I think that sort of subconsciously, I just ended up living my life like that. And the more people that told me that I couldn't succeed in this industry, based on, quite a few things, really, my where I'm from, my class, my disability. It just gave me even more fire. And I think that each day I didn't ask for the world. I just asked for a tiny, tiny, tiny little piece. That's all I asked for each day. When I write off to people, when I go to castings, when I meet with new directors, I've never asked them for the lead role in their next film. I've never asked them for, to be fast tracked in. I was always prepared to work really hard for it. So I never asked for the world. I just asked for the smallest little bit so that I could build my own world myself, really. And that's what I would encourage everybody to do, no matter what area you want to go into. When you get that first contact, email them and ask them what they can do for you. Can I do some shadowing? Can I do a week's work experience? Have you got any tips that you could just bullet point for me? If you ask for those little bits, you'll build your own world, and it will be far better than the one that you could get fast tracked into.
And I think that's great advice. I remember when I was very young and I heard some very famous actor, and someone said, what advice would you give to a young person? And I think they said something along the lines of, if you want to do it, don't bother. If you have to, well, it'll happen. You've got to have that level of absolute determination that you talked about there. I just want to go into the whole thing about the portrayal of people with limb differences on TV. You were saying there it is getting better, and we are seeing more people of difference, whatever it is, whether it's their gender, whether it's their race, their colour, their ability, whatever it might be. We are seeing more and more. First of all, are you okay with the speed of change? And secondly, what else can be done to make sure that everybody from every walk of life is equally represented?
There's a few things that we can all do. The first one is that we make it everyone's responsibility. So, I'm talking about this in the arts, but actually it's reflective of every industry, actually. In the arts, we've had to stop the conversations where it said, oh, it's just down to the writers. They didn't write disabled parts. We've gone, there is no such thing as a disabled part. You just have to get us in. So slowly in the arts industry, everyone is starting to realize that it's their responsibility, even down to the amazing researchers. If you're a researcher on a TV program and I don't know, it's set in the 80s. Okay, well, what happened 20 years earlier? You had thalidomide children being born. So why couldn't you have somebody with a limb difference that's in their 20s now in this show? Let's make it everyone's responsibility, and the whole thing will happen so much quicker. I do hear on a daily basis things are getting better, and I have to agree. They, even in comparison to how long this industry has been going, my very, very short amount of time so far here, it's changed massively. But, no, not but, I don't like using but, and now is the time not to become complacent. So quite often when things are starting to change, you get people going, oh, but it's working, isn't it? It's working, it's fine. Yeah, it is. It's not where it should be. So just because things just because we are starting to make changes, let's use that as a catalyst for even more change. Let's not use that as an opportunity to become complacent. So yeah, for me, it's making sure it's everybody's responsibility, and even us as actors with disabilities, as disabled actors, as actors with limb differences, or anybody wanting to work. This is the beauty of disability, is that it works across everything. You just have to let the person in front of you know exactly why it should be you, whether that's a job interview, whether that's getting a role in something, whether that's a sporting event. You will bring something so special and wonderful to the job, to the role, not because of how you look, but because of the experiences you have had growing up. You have had different experiences, and that would have given you such a richness that maybe other people haven't experienced, or if they have, they've experienced it in a different way. So I really think it's about take what makes you different, magnify it, glorify it, make it the best thing you own, because that is how we will encourage change. It's how we'll educate, and it's how we'll live in a better world.
I mean, really, really well put. And it's really interesting. You said a little bit earlier on about being different and how that then is portrayed on TV, and the fact that writers don't write roles for disabled people per se. Where do you find that balance between not wishing to be defined by your difference, by your disability, but being defined as you as an actor, but there is still that difference, and therefore there's a role to play with that difference? Where do you find that line where people effectively become, ability blind, as it were?
I think for me, it's always been. I think it's something we need to get rid of. Sometimes people say, "Oh, it's color blind casting or it's ability blind casting." Don't be blind to it. Why would you be blind to it? Our color, our race, our culture, our ability, our class that we grew up in. Don't be blind to that, because that will be absolute magic in the character that this person is going to portray. So I think we need to steer away from being blind to it and just accept it. I say to writers all the time, write the part you want to write it. Write what they love, write what they hate, write what they're good at, write what their job is, write who their family are, write your characters exactly the same way as you would write anything, and then cast people. Not in all the roles, obviously. We're not greedy. We don't take all of them. I don't think it'll ever get to that anyway, so we also don't need to worry about that. But then cast some disabled people in it. You'll realise you haven't got to worry one bit. I heard someone once say, but as writers, we just don't know enough about somebody that has to use a wheelchair. We don't know enough about someone that had to have a leg amputated. We don't know enough about a girl with one arm. So we just, how do we write that authentically? You don't write it. You don't write it. You leave it to us to do it, because, well, we have it. That's why you cast the right people. That's why you stop casting non-disabled people in disabled roles. That's the first one. I mean, I can't even believe we are still talking about that. I don't like to give that on much airtime, because then it almost seems like we're still fighting for that to not happen. We should be much further on from that one now. Non-disabled people should not be playing disabled roles until disabled people are playing non-disabled roles. But at the moment, considering we're only just about allowed to have the ones that are written for disability, at least let us keep those ones. And when we live in a world where disabled people can play all the non-disabled roles, then maybe we won't mind so much about non-disabled people playing our roles. But yeah, absolutely. No steering away from it. Just looking it straight in the eye and going, yeah, that was that character. She was played by somebody with one arm. I didn't have to write anything because she's already got one arm. You don't really need to write much about that. It's on the screen in front of you. And the penny drop, when people realize that, they sort of go, oh, so I don't have to talk about it. No, you unless you think it's really important, unless there's a scene that you've really got in your head, and in that case, work with the actor. 9 times out of 10, I've always worked with writers on it. I've said, look, if there's anything that you think is important to get in Life, which was, the last show that was out for me on BBC, we had a lovely scene that I was really happy that brilliant Mike Bartlett wrote. It was about PIP, personal independence payment. And it, shone a light on the awful, awful conversations disabled people have to have when fighting for the tiny bit of money that they get. Mike worked with me on that so that he did it as authentically as possible. But apart from those few times throughout 6 episodes, it just wasn't mentioned because it didn't need to be, because I was an actress on TV with one arm. That was all that was needed.
Let's talk about some of those roles that you've played, Coronation Street and BBC, as you say. So tell us a little bit about some of the roles and, how you did get over the preconceptions they might have had about somebody with one arm, and then tease us a little bit about what we might expect in the future from you.
Yeah, so I mean, Coronation Street, I wasn't in it for a very long time at all, but it was a wonderful time, and it was something that elevated me massively, which I will always be very thankful for, and I will always be very thankful to the team there. what was so lovely was that was my first sort of, you know, bigger role in something quite massive. And the character of Imogen, she hadn't been written as a disabled character. She was just this feisty woman that was coming in to basically steal the girlfriend of one of the you know, long running characters in it. And I'd already done a few auditions with Corrie, and what people have to remember is when you do an audition, if you don't get it that time, they keep all of that on file. Like, they really do keep you in mind for when the right, that's their job. So when the right thing comes up, they make sure they remember it. And the casting director at Corrie, wonderful Jenny Radcliffe, had my show reel, and I'd always kept in touch with them, just let them know what I was doing as and when. And when they were casting for the role of Imogen, they showed it to the director that would be filming those episodes and said, "Oh, should we get Melissa into to audition for the role?" And he looked at my show reel and he said, "No, I don't want her to audition. I want us to give her the role." So I actually got that part without auditioning, which is crazy. I was in LA at the time when I found out. I had just, I spoke earlier about this month of May where I got into fitness, and I wanted to get my arm out more, get my arm out in general. And what I didn't mention was that I started doing a fitness regime called Pound, which is a drumming workout. And they set a competition for the person who changed their life the most, and I ended up winning it. So I went to Los Angeles, they flew me out there, and I took my little brother with me, and it was about 3:00 in the morning, and my agent called and said, "Hi, darling." And I sort of said, "Oh, hello." And she said, "Oh gosh, you're in LA. I completely forgot. It's 3 a.m. And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I'm just calling to tell you that you've been cast in Coronation Street." And I sort of was like, "Oh, what? I haven't even auditioned." And then the phone line went funny, and she said, "I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Listen, I'll call you in the morning." And the phone just went dead, and I was just sort of lay there. My brother was next to me. He said, "What's going on?" I said, "I don't really know, but apparently I've been casting Corrie." And about 10 minutes later, my agent sent me an email, and I remember opening it, and the subject line was, "Don't worry, darling, you're not dreaming." And because she knew that this was going to be something that could potentially, you know, change my life. Because, you know, there are lots of actors that go into wonderful shows like Coronation Street, but not all of them have bodies like mine. And so I think she just knew that this was going to be an opportunity for me to be seen. And so from there, you know, I was fortunate enough to go on to do other shows. And before Corrie, I'd done some lovely shows as well. Most recently was Life on BBC, which is still available on iPlayer, just to plug it in there. And that's when I got to star alongside the incredible Alison Steadman, Peter Davidson, Adrian Lester, and Victoria Hamilton. We were the sort of leads of the show, and I couldn't believe that, you know, little old me was amongst these incredible names. And that show has been fantastic for me in my career, and I'm incredibly grateful. Again, that part, Mike Bartlett was quite certain that he wanted the role of Hannah to be somebody with a disability. He didn't know what disability. He was quite open to what that was going to be, and again allowed it to be character centered, and that's all we ever ask. As I said before, just make sure it's character centered, and then everything else falls into place. So yeah, it's been really great. I've got my one-woman show coming out. It was meant to be in October. Obviously, theatres aren't open at the moment, so that's not happening yet. But we've got an industry sharing of it later on this year, and then we will be taking it on tour in spring of next year. So we're going to do a UK tour of the show. That won't be suitable for Reach children, but it will be suitable for their parents or their older siblings, and actually will probably be quite informative. So yes.
That's really great to hear, and it's always wonderful to hear success stories, but obviously we recognize that success comes with a lot of sweat and tears and emotions along the way. And I'm just aware of our time here, so I just want to talk a little bit about Reach, because I know you came into Reach a little bit later. First of all, hopefully we will actually get to see you at the next Reach weekend, whenever we can get in front of each other again and see each other again. But about your Reach journey, what Reach has meant to you, and what you recommend people do to get the most out of the organisation.
Yeah, look, I say this every time, but I am so grateful that Reach is in my life. I wish that it had been in my life much sooner. I wish that I could have gone on camping weekends or weekends away or activity weeks and just been around people that looked exactly like me. I can't begin to imagine what that would have done to my life. Growing up, I think it would have meant that those times where I very much felt on my own wouldn't have happened. So I can only wish that I'd have joined or known about Reach sooner. It wasn't until 2017, after Coronation Street, and Reach reached out to me, and I just think, if you know somebody with an upper limb difference, make sure that they are part of Reach. They will be joining a family, a community, a group of people that will elevate and empower and encourage and educate. And it's the exact people that people with limb differences need to be around. We need to have the opportunity to see ourselves reflected, because that in turn gives us such a confidence boost. So I really, really, really would encourage so many people to just make sure that you're part of Reach. Those weekends are fabulous. What I love about Reach is there is something for everyone. So you've got the child with the limb difference, you've got the parent, you've got the sibling. There is just so much for everyone. And I think that's what's so important, is that everybody is so valued in this, experience that we're all living. And it's brilliant. I tell everyone I know about Reach. I'm currently filming, well, just finished filming for Grantchester, which is a new, it's not a new, it's series 6 of the series. It's, gosh, I don't even know when Grantchester came out, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But it's a period drama on ITV. And I was talking to the other actors about Reach the other day, and just telling them, what it's like to have a community of people that just get it. They talk your language, they know your feelings, you don't have to explain anything, because you know that the majority of people there know exactly what you are talking about without even having to say words at all. So if you know somebody that has a limb difference, make sure they're in that environment, because it's a wonderful, wonderful place to be.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to end our conversation. It's amazing. We've chatted on for ages now, but it's been great to get a really good insight into your life, your challenges, and also to hear about your successes. And we wish you all the very best with all of your future endeavours. We look forward to seeing you on our screens again very soon. And for those who are of a suitable age, hopefully they'll get to see you when you go on your one-woman show as well. In the meantime, to everybody watching, thank you so much indeed for joining us again. We'll see you again next week. In the meantime, don't forget about the resources available at Reach. Just go onto the website, have a look, see all the things there, get involved in the conversations, and as Melissa said, just be a part of this great community who are there ready to support. But most of all, Melissa, thank you so much indeed for joining us, and we hope to see you again very soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.